Hello, everyone. We're just going to wait a few minutes before we get started so we can start right on the hour. Why don't you let us know where you are all joining us from today? You can pop it into the chat. Let us know your name, where you're coming from, so we can all get to know each other a little bit better. And we will get started in just a minute here. My name is Kimberly. I'm from Keela. I'm tuning in from Vancouver. I haven't actually looked outside today if it's rainy or sunny. I'm going to assume it's rainy. We have someone joining. Jesse will be joining us from Arkansas. People coming in from Toronto. Yeah, while everyone's coming in, just pop your name and where you're from in the chat, and we'll get started in just a minute here. Terry's coming from Florida, but it's definitely, I hope it's sunny down there. If you want to send some sun up here, I'm not going to complain about that. Not today. Oh, you got some of the Vancouver rain then.
We've got some sun peeking through. I see some blue skies out there, so that's nice. I think it's going to be a pretty day here.
Someone else joining from Toronto, from Los Angeles, isn't it, where it's also raining? Is the whole, all of North America just raining today? Maybe
yeah,
the big cloud covering all of us. People joining from Quebec, welcome. Awesome. I'd love to see a bunch of people from all across Canada and the States joining today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. All right, so it's just a minute after the half hour, so let's get started. First of all, thank you all so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. I'm Kimberly, Keela's Partnerships Coordinator. It's a pleasure to meet you all. We also have Meredith, our Head of Marketing, helping us out today on the tech side of things. You might see her in the chat box answering some of your technical questions, so feel free to say hello to her at any point if you need any help. Before we get started, I just wanted to start the session today by acknowledging that here in Vancouver, where Keela is based, we are on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. We always like to take a moment and give thanks for their generosity and hospitality on these lands and waters where we work. We want to thank you all so much for coming and joining us today. If you are new to Keela, welcome. Keela is a complete nonprofit management software that helps you manage your donors, market your nonprofit, and most importantly, raise more money for your cause. Now, just before I introduce our expert speaker for today's session, just some housekeeping things to go over. Today's session is 45 minutes in length, including a 10 to 15 minute Q&A session at the end. Don't forget that at any point, you can adjust your closed captioning settings at the bottom of the screen by clicking the button. Throughout the presentation, please feel free to write any questions that you have in the chat box or in the Q&A. We're going to be sure to get to as many as we can at the end of the session. And speaking of the chat box, please remember to select everyone when you type so that all of our guests today can read your comments and questions. And finally, this webinar is being recorded. You're going to receive access to the recording and the slide deck by the end of this week. And with all that out of the way, I'm going to stop talking now and welcome our speaker for the day, Jesse, the founder of Branches Missions Lab. Jesse is incredibly passionate about nonprofits. He loves helping nonprofits grow. Over the past decade, he's worked with hundreds of nonprofit organizations of various sizes, helping them raise over $100 million in fundraising revenue. Jesse has been there. He has sifted through all kinds of nonprofit marketing strategies and knows what works and what doesn't. So he's very well placed to help you all develop a plan that actually gets results. We're very excited to have him with us today. So without further ado, I will pass it off to you, Jesse. Welcome.
Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be here. I love getting to do this because I'm surrounded, virtually at least, with people that are out there doing good work. And in fact, we call you all good makers around here. We believe that you're some of the most passionate people in the world. So yeah, I'm curious, actually, on a scale of 1 to 10, put in the chat, how passionate are you about your cause? About the thing that you're dedicated to in your nonprofit? How passionate are you? Is it a 7, 8, 10? So I'm seeing already a lot of 10s, a 7 and 8. There's some more 10s. So no surprise. I love the passion of nonprofit leaders and good makers. You're out there giving your life to making the world a better place. So I just want to start by saying thank you for that. Often that work can be thankless and underappreciated. And I want to say thank you. You are making our world a better place. You're serving all of us in various ways. And so thank you for that. And so I love what you're doing. I have dedicated my life to coming alongside and championing and telling your stories to more people, and hopefully training and helping you today and learning how to do that yourself as well. So a little bit about me. I'm a believer. My faith is really important to me. I'm a husband to almost 15 years now to my wife, a founder of a couple of companies, and Goodmaker U is the one that trains nonprofits. And I'm a coach. I actually created a program I want to tell you about, but I'm also a girl dad, and that's a big part of my identity. Hashtag girl dad. These are my three lovely girls. They're 9, 7, and 3. And oh my goodness, I just can't have a presentation where I don't show a photo of my girls. And if you want to see hundreds more, just let me know. I'll happy pull out my phone and show you some more pictures. I've got plenty. But like I said, I'm also a coach and a trainer of nonprofits. And we created this program called the Goodmaker Growth Program, where we bring a cohort, a small group of nonprofits, 6 to 8 nonprofit leaders together to learn and how to raise awareness and raise funds together. And so I'll tell you more about that later, but a lot of the material that we're sharing today is the same material that we go into in the program, just much deeper in the program. So I want to tell you a quick story. This was one of the first days I was at a nonprofit. I was a new leader in this organization, and this was the leadership team. And I sat in this boardroom, and specifically in this one chair here that was right there. And I remember all day sitting in this chair, feeling so nervous and scared because I had a fundraising goal that year, and it was my first ever fundraising goal. Put in the chat if you have a fundraising goal. Just want to know if anybody else here is responsible for fundraising. But I had a goal, and I had to report to everybody how in the world I was going to hit that goal. Okay, I'm not the only one. I see a couple of others. I was telling this group of amazing leaders how I was going to hit this goal, and I really had no idea. I was new in this fundraising world. And it was a very vulnerable feeling, very uncomfortable. I started to hate fundraising. In fact, I feared criticism. Would people tell me I was doing it wrong or asking the wrong way, or they would just straight up reject me when I invited them to give. Ultimately, feared failure, that I would have to report back to those people I respected, the leadership team around me, that I didn't come close to hitting my goal. What if I couldn't raise any money at all? And just, would anybody give? And so I really started to hate fundraising and had these feelings of fear. So I'm curious if any of you have been there or felt this way at all at any point in time. The first week at a nonprofit, and even if you're not in fundraising, you probably experienced this. Nonprofit life can feel so busy. Just there's so many things to do. I had to wear a lot of different hats. And just felt like I was immediately distracted putting out fires. There was one thing after another, some emergency or urgent thing to deal with, and just, became overwhelmed by it all, really. And so just curious if anybody else has ever felt any of these things. Hopefully I'm not alone. Hopefully you can relate. But yeah, if you can relate, put it in the chat. Yeah, put yes in the chat. That'll just make me feel better that it wasn't just me. So that was my kind of first experience with the nonprofit world, and but thankfully things got better. Fast forward with me a decade now, I've been in this industry in one form or another, working with or in nonprofits. And during those next 4 years at this organization, I got to help see this organization grow to $40 million in annual fundraising revenue, with just rapid growth year over year. And I can't take credit for that, but I got to be a part of it. I got to see it happen and watch and learn from others. And it was amazing to be a part of it. And I got to learn from world-class fundraisers and see why people were giving, sit across from major donors and broad based donors, and really understand how it all worked. In the next 10 years, I have had the chance to, since then, lead 30 plus fundraising campaigns myself, teach over 5,000 nonprofit leaders some of the strategies I've learned, and help raise over $100 million. I've worked in the nonprofit industry for over a decade. And in that time, just experimenting, failing, learning from those mistakes, and then scaling what's working on repeat over and over again. Really just taking every chance I can to learn And you're here at a webinar because clearly you appreciate learning as well. So I love that. And that was key to me growing, me learning. And so I would just, way to go. You're in learning mode. I appreciate that mindset. That's so essential. And I still take that approach today. But I share all that to say, like, a lot of what I learned in this 10 years, I'm trying to boil down and share with you today in 45 minutes or so. And so I've got a lot to cover, and thankfully the recording, the slides are going to be sent to you, but I just want you to know that I'm going to cover a lot of ground really quickly. So I want to share some leadership levers, things I've learned in leadership seats that have really opened up growth for nonprofits, as well as some of the blockers. And what I mean by a growth blocker is maybe a hidden ceiling that you can't see, but is there, and it's keeping you from growing to the next level as an organization, as a leader, as a team. I also want to talk a little bit about social media and digital strategy, and make sure that you're thinking about that properly, about new donor acquisition models, and what are the models we see that are working to get new donors. I want to share practical next steps because we'll have some big ideas. We've got 5 of those leadership levers. We've got a lot to talk about, but I want to give you some practical next steps throughout so that you're not just left with ideas, but you can go take action. And then finally, I want to give you some free tools to make it all easier, to give you a jump start on all of this. In fact, let's give those free tools to you right now. If in case you want to go ahead and grab those, you can do that with this link. And I think Michael on my team is going to put the link in the chat, so you can just click on it. But if you want, you can also scan the QR code there. But it's a quick link, just brancheslab.com/bkit. And so, yeah, Michael put that in there. That's going to give you a few downloads, a Canva template to allow you to do some of the things we're going to talk about today easier. Basically, just get you a jump start on it with these templates and things. So yeah, link is in the chat. Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So let's get into those 5 leadership levers. And I'll start with number 1, this picture of this girl here. I'm not sure. At first I thought she was cheering, but now I think she's actually pulling the leadership lever like this, pulling the lever. Okay, so hopefully you're tracking with me. So leadership lever number 1 is crafting a clear core message. And maybe you've heard this, maybe you're on the fence thinking, is this really that important? It is number 1 for a reason. And that is because it really does matter. It matters because the confused mind always says no. And so if your message isn't clear, people are they might not say no to you, but they may just ghost you. They may not respond at all. They may click off your website or stop following you on social media. They're gonna say no in one way or another because they're confused. It's really hard to give to something or get excited about something, even harder to share something if you don't understand it, if you can't wrap your head around it. And so I just want to make sure that you understand how important a clear message is. And so let me talk about how to get there. So, well, first, actually, put in the chat. I want to just see where you're at today. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well can you talk about what you do at your nonprofit? So 10 would be awesome, very clear, concise. Everybody gets it. When I share it, people are like, yes, I want to be involved. Here's my money. Or on a 1 would be obviously the opposite of that. So, okay, looking in the chat, we've got some 8s and 7s. There's a couple 9s. Great job. And then a couple lower numbers there. So that's good to know. Well, I would encourage you all, and mostly good numbers. So that's great. You're in a good place there. There's a 5. Definitely you need some work if you're at a 5. But really, I would say every inch closer to that 10 makes a big difference, because I think there's a tipping point maybe at 9 or 10 where you go from people just going, yeah, I think I get it, to feeling confident about sharing to others. And then your givers become advocates and fundraisers for you, right? So try to keep working on that message. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that today. If you can't talk about what you do, you can't create awareness for your nonprofit, you can't grow your audience, and you can't even fundraise at all. So it's one of those hidden blockers that we're talking about today. And one of the reasons it's so hard is because you have the curse of knowledge. You know way more about your organization, all the ins and outs, all the details, and your donor base, your audience, they don't need to know all of that. In fact, if you try to communicate all of that, you're going to overwhelm them, you're going to lose them, and you're going to confuse them. So I would just encourage you to keep it simple and craft a clear core message. And some of the steps to do that are first, just knowing your target audience, like what is going to make sense to them. If they're not in your industry, then you've got to use a certain language that's going to make sense to them. And then cut out the jargon. Just no matter what your industry is, what area of work you're doing, there's going to be some jargon. There's going to be some abbreviations or some words or terms that people won't know except maybe you or the people in that space. So I want to encourage you to cut all of that out. It shouldn't be on your website. It shouldn't be in your email. It shouldn't be on your social media because you're isolating the people that don't speak the language. And so you've got to simplify that. And then test it with your audience. Test your messaging with your audience. Actually checking in with people who represent your target audience and saying, hey, does this make sense to you? Are you tracking? Do you understand what I'm trying to communicate? Do you get what we do? A lot of times I'll read off or say to someone, hey, this is what we do. Now you tell me back, what did I say? And if they miss it or they get it off, then you know that you've got some work to do to make it more clear. Ultimately, there's 3 C's that I'm looking for when I'm looking at a core message. You want it to be clear, like I've said, concrete. And what I mean by concrete is you can take a picture of it. And so what I mean by that is, like, you can take a picture of a building or a vehicle, take a picture of a bed, or a lot of things, but you can't take picture of empowerment. You can't take a picture of transformation. You can't take a picture of impact. Those are some of your favorite words. I know you nonprofit leaders, you love those words. I do too, but they're not concrete. And so because they're not concrete, they're less clear. People can't wrap their head around what you mean exactly by empowering people or equipping people. That's unclear. So get concrete about that. It's not going to be as the language will be maybe simpler or more not quite as comprehensive, but that's okay. I would absolutely rather be clear and concrete than comprehensive, because they don't have to know everything that you know. Maybe eventually they will learn about everything you do, but for now, you should lean toward clear, concrete language, and then keep it concise. Our attention spans are short, and so we've got to keep it concise. People won't read paragraphs and paragraphs on your website. Keep it concise. So if you want some other tips on communicating clearly, I'm always going to recommend stories. Storytelling is memorable for people. We were made to be storytellers. And so when you tell stories, they're easy to share. They're easy for people to remember, and they're emotive. They help them connect with the heart of what you do and why you do it. I always recommend using you language. Your website should have you and your typed out on the homepage. It's making your audience feel like you're talking to them and about them, and they're the center of the story. And it's not all about your nonprofit all the time, right? So you language is a really good trick to make your messaging immediately better. Keep your tone very relational. I want to encourage you to not make it over corporate or formal, but keep it relational in all your writing and messaging. Always want to be proving that you're having an impact, showing stories of that, data, however you can prove the impact of your organization, and then give clear and concrete invitations. Don't beat around the bush when it comes to inviting people to give. Just make it clear how you're inviting them to take a part in your organization. And then I put stories on here twice because I love them that much. Keep sharing those stories of impact, stories of why you got started. Be a great storyteller. Awesome. All right, so here is how we draft a core message at Goodmaker U. In our coaching cohort, where we walk through this with nonprofit leaders, we're often starting, one of the first exercises we do is their core message, because it's so important. And most nonprofits just don't have a 10 out of 10 message yet. And so we walk through and draft for them a sentence for each of these elements. A POW statement that gets people's attention, a how statement that helps them clearly, concretely know what you do or how you solve the problem. And then the wow statement is that amazing transformational why of why you exist and the impact that you're having in the world. And then finally, you always want to give them a next step. Like, what's that call to action in this moment? And that changes actually depending on the context. The first three may not change much, but that last one, the now statement, it's always changing. So we affectionately call this the brown cow exercise because, you know, it's like pow, how, wow, now, brown cow. It just makes sense, right? So if you want to try this out and fill this out, of course, we'd love to have you in our cohort. We're going to share about that a little bit more later, but we also provided a free exercise for you to go and a worksheet where you can fill this out in Canva at this link here. And there's also a PDF version. So we'll email you that if you go and grab that kit. So Michael, put the link in the chat again, if you don't mind, so people can click over there if they want this exercise. But if you download this kit, you'll get this exercise. So that way you can draft your core message and start to work on that. I will say, usually when people do this for the first time ever, they get it maybe 60% there, 70% there. And that's where our cohort comes in handy, because we're able to help workshop and say, that word's not quite right, or that's not very clear, or it's too long. And we work together to get it just right and get it to that 10 out of 10. So I would encourage you, whether you're joining up a cohort with us or you're asking your friends and neighbors or your team to help you, just keep workshopping it until you get it to that really good place. All right, so that's lever one. Moving on to lever two, I want to encourage you to be thinking about how you can build an integrated digital ecosystem. Now that sounds kind of techie. You may be wondering, do I need to be techie? Maybe that's not you, and that's okay, because it sounds techie. It's not. It really is simple, and I'll explain what I mean here in a second. So I wanted to start by just saying, just because you may not be techie doesn't mean you can skip out on digital. And you can raise a lot of money through face-to-face conversations, but ultimately our world is shifting more and more to where a digital ecosystem is essential. It's not optional. Your website, your social media presence, your email communications, it represents who you are, even to those major donors that you meet with face-to-face. It represents you to your board members or potential board members, and of course to your audience online and your donors. And so you've got to get it right, and it's just no longer optional anymore. And I'll say this, just in case you're thinking social media and only social media. A lot of organizations, they focus too much on social media. Hey, we manage and help with social media all the time at our agency. I believe it's important, but only if it's a part of a system. In isolation, social media is a waste of time. If that's all you're doing is posting on social media and there is no integration with your email or your website or advertising, if it's just on an island, posting out there all the time, and you're wondering why there's no results from that, I'm telling you right now, it's because it needs to be a part of a bigger system. So what is that system? It could include, and it should include, your website, your social media, your email automations, and your email campaigns, the manual sends. And then advertising, I recommend getting into advertising to grow your new donor base. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then influencer partnerships. These are a few things that could be in your ecosystem. Let me stop for a moment and talk about email automation, because of all of these, I'm just guessing a lot of you maybe are wondering what that is. Email automation is essential these days. It's such a great opportunity. And it's the tech for that is everywhere, and it doesn't cost a lot. And so you should be automating email series to people in key moments in their journey with your nonprofit. So when they first become a subscriber to your email list, they should get a welcome series, helping them understand what you do and giving them stories and sharing your best content. They should also get one when they donate the first time ever, saying thank you, and again, showing the impact of your organization. So this is a part of your ecosystem, but none of these things should stand alone. They're a part of an integrated system that works together. They all need to be aligned with goals. Like if you don't have a goal defined for each one of these things, then start there. What's your number one goal for your website? Do you know the answer to that? Are you measuring it? Are you tracking it? What's your number one goal for social media? Are you measuring that? Are you tracking it? What about email? What's your goal there? And how are they working together in an integrated way and focused? You can't have 10 goals for your homepage of your website. You got to focus in on one, maybe two things that you're trying to accomplish, no more than that. So ultimately, if you're not getting results from your digital ecosystem, you've got work to do, right? That's the final test. So you might be thinking, oh, we do have goals. They're integrated somewhat. They're somewhat focused, but you're not getting results. So there's clearly work to be done. We use another exercise called our audience journey. And this is, again, part of our cohort, one of our key exercises we walk nonprofit leaders through. And what it allows you to do is map out the audience journey, taking someone who's never heard of your organization, they're completely unaware at the top of your funnel, and guiding them through step by step through a journey of deepening engagement with your cause. So they go from unaware to, okay, I've heard of them, I'm aware, not really engaged in any way, to you inviting them in a really irresistible way to engage. And maybe it's a small engagement at first, and then eventually to make that first gift or to take part in some other way as a volunteer, and then eventually to become an advocate or reoccurring giver or major donor. So there's a journey that someone takes. And if you think it goes from A to Z overnight, it usually doesn't. It usually takes time and intention for you to guide someone through this journey. But the first step is just mapping it out. How do we expect people to move through this? And do we have an irresistible invitation to using our digital ecosystem to guide people step by step through this journey? We always recommend any digital strategy, whether it's your email or your social media, your ads, that you're always testing, tracking, and tweaking everything you're doing. That's how you find success online. So if you do something, you put it out in the world, maybe you run an advertising campaign or you launch a new website and then you just don't touch it for a long time and just leave it out there and it doesn't really work. Well, it's because you need this process. Even people like myself who've been in this industry for a decade or more, we still are always testing, sometimes failing, tracking our results so we know that it missed the mark, and then changing it, tweaking it, or relaunching a new test. So you've got to have that cycle of iteration and change. And if you're locked into a system where you can't make changes, like your website isn't easy to edit or change, you can't test it or track it, then you've got to get to a better place, or otherwise that's going to be one of those hidden blockers. That's going to be keeping you from growth, stealing your growth potential. You need to know how those things are performing. You've got to get to a place where you can do that. So you can test new strategies, see if it works, tweak it, and get better each round around this little cycle here. Okay, once again, wanted to point you to this starter kit. We put a lot of stuff in the starter kit, so make sure you go download this. But we have in there this funnel. You can see it on the left here. It's a Canva doc, but we also have a PDF version. But you can use that to map out, go ahead and start mapping out your funnel and how you guide people through each of these steps. Again, if you need help with this is the exact kind of thing we do in our cohorts. And we would love to help you with this exercise. So your next steps is assess your system. Basically, how are we doing? What pieces of our system are integrated, what are lacking, so you know clearly what your next steps are. You need to set clear goals if you don't have those for each piece of your system. You need to map out that audience journey. Use the free exercise I just gave you. Craft irresistible invitations. What I mean by that is your call to action for each step of the journey should be irresistible. And that's only going to happen if you're thinking about your audience and you're serving them with valuable content, valuable opportunities. You're not just selling them all the time, right? You're inviting them to more value each step of the way. And if you don't know your audience and you don't know your core message, you're going to have a hard time really communicating that value. And if you're feeling like all of this is too hard and you need some help, we do this day in and day out. So join our program. We'll post a link at the end, and we'd love to help you with all of this. So lever number 3 is designing a consistent brand experience. And I know what you might be thinking, like, oh, I'm happy with our logo. We're good there. We don't need to work on that. But I actually want to stop you and just say, this might actually be the number one hidden hurdle that we see. This may be the thing that's holding a lot of organizations back, and it's hidden because no one will tell them. No one's bold enough or frank enough to just come out and say, hey, your brand stinks and I am not going to associate with it. I'm not going to give because I have no idea what's going on. It's so disjointed. It's all over the place. And so your brand, I want you to know, is more than a name. It's not your name. It's not your logo. It's even more than design and visuals. Your brand is so much more than that. It's actually more important than you think as well. It's more important than all of those things combined, because your brand is actually the full total experience that they have with your organization. That's your brand value. So there's a lot of ways that could happen, right? It's more than just a logo. Let me give you some examples of what a brand might experience like. And this is just a fun little game we'll play. So if you could pick one of these parks to send your kids or grandkids to, which one would you choose? Right? Pretty obvious. That's a brand experience. Same with the car, right? If you want to drive a car, which one would you drive? If you want to live in a neighborhood, which one would you live in? I mean, there may be some benefits to both of these, but and then which kind of brand experience is more attractive to you? I know some people really like the one on the right, but for me, I'm can't wait to go into this Apple store here. So hopefully you understand what I mean, that your vibe attracts your tribe. Like, your brand is going to send a message to your audience. And if your brand is lacking right now, it could be a huge limiter for you. So your brand's more than your name, logo, design. It's also your writing style. It's the people on your team. It's you. It's your personality as an organization, what you sound like, and the feelings you give people. It's a great question to ask. How do you make people feel when they're interacting with your organization, when they're on your website? What are the feelings that you give, and what are the moments you make for them? Are there moments that you make that they'll never forget? That's a brand experience that you can be proud of. So your brand's expressed everywhere, right? Of course, your website and social media, but also at events and even in receipt emails and volunteers and Zoom calls and board meetings. It's everywhere. So just be thinking about that full experience. It might overwhelm you a little bit to think, wow, how can I control it all? I don't know if I can handle all of that and keep it all together. And you definitely can't control it all, but there's a lot you can do to help guide it in the right direction. So a great brand starts with a good, clear vision, mission, and values. A lot of you have that, and that's awesome. And then that clear core message that we talked about earlier, got to have that, so people know what you do and why it matters. And then you need to define your personality as a brand. A personality is the thing that sometimes sets you apart from other nonprofits and other brands. Help people understand what makes you unique. Is your personality fun and humorous, or is it more serious and formal? What's the vibe that you're giving off in your writing and in your design? And once you define that, you're able to keep it consistent. And that consistency is key with a great brand. Speaking of consistency, a brand style guidelines is a key way to develop that. If you don't have a style guide or brand guidelines, you've got to have that. And a lot of brand guidelines are like 50 pages or 100 pages for big nonprofits. But if that's overwhelming to you, we've got a one-page basic style guide that you can use. And so once again, it's in that Canva worksheet. You can go download that. I thought I had a picture of it, but it's not showing up here. But it's just a one page, and it allows you to define what are the fonts we use, the colors we use, what's our style with photography, what's our logo usage, and what's our icon. And once you define some of those core things, all of a sudden your brand is going to start to clean up and be more consistent. A lot of you are way beyond that, but for those of you who don't have that defined yet, I highly recommend just taking this time to go through that exercise. And your brand transformation may just begin with a reality check, sadly. So you might just need to know that a weak, sloppy, or inconsistent brand is a non-starter for many donors. You may be getting by with friends and family for the first couple of years of your nonprofit, but at some point, you're not going to be able to grow. You're not going to be able to scale because donors are thinking, yeah, I'm not so sure about this organization. And they probably won't call it a brand problem. They probably won't even tell you about this, but it's an issue because they don't want to associate with something that looks, again, sloppy or inconsistent. So I'm curious, after hearing me talk about what I mean by brand experience, put in the chat for me 1 to 10. How are we doing on brand? 10 would be perfect, consistent, clean, loving our brand, our message is clear, everybody is responding. And then a 1, not so much. So awesome. Okay, so I see 5, 7, 6, 2, 6, 7, 6. So anything under, a 9, I would say you've got to work to tighten that up. Like what's causing that for you? What is it out there that's making that brand experience not so strong? If you're well under that, if you're like a 6 or 5 or under 5, then you've got some work to do, and it's too important to put it off any longer. It's an urgent issue at that point. All right, so some simple next steps. Audit your brand experience, to help understand where is it strong, where is it lacking. Ask your target audience, share it with some people and say, how do you feel the brand is lacking? Where is its strengths? And ask an expert to maybe get someone that has experience in this space to speak into that and help guide you. Of course, once again, we would love to help you in our program. So if you want some expertise alongside of you or some coaching, that's what we do. All right, so step 4 is to create a new donor acquisition model. So some of you have some existing donors, but you need new donors. And there's a debate out there, and I'm always talking to nonprofits about the importance of existing donors and new donors and the roles that each play in your ecosystem of givers. And I know most nonprofits get really excited about new donors. They're like, we need new donors. We don't have enough donors, so we need new. And so let's talk about that for a second. Existing donors, when you go to fundraise, you have a fundraising campaign, it's going to be faster to get them to give again than it will be to find a new donor. So if you're in a cash crunch or you need to hit a goal, your existing donors is where I would start. It's going to be easier because they already know who you are. They already have given. It's probably going to be cheaper, much cheaper to go and get them to give again. And I would say existing donors are essential for your short-term goals. However, new donors, while they're slower to get, a little harder, sometimes cost more money and resources to go find them and acquire them, they're essential for the long term. If you have long-term visions of growth and expansion of your cause, then you're going to need to grow your donor base and you're going to reach new donors. And so you've got to just kind of keep this in mind and be working toward both, really activating existing donors and acquiring new donors as well. So how do you do that? So the 3 new donor acquisition models that I wanted to hit on today are 3 A's. So advocates, allies, and advertising. So I'll really quickly unpack each one of these for you, just a high level view. So an advocate is an individual or family who's so all in about what you do. They are passionate about your mission that they are already telling other people about it. They can't wait to tell. And that leads to new donors. And there's a lot of real practical ways you can equip an advocate. Peer-to-peer fundraising is one of my favorites. They could host events at their house. You could give them a kit of assets and things that they can share, graphics and things they can share online. But I would just most importantly tell you to equip them with 3 things, right? Because you could give them all these other things, but the 3 things they need the most is a story to tell. They need a story, like a real story of a life change. Maybe it's their own story or someone they know, but if not, what's the story they can tell? Because remember, stories spread and they're sticky. Give them a clear message, back to that clear core message. They should know what that is, and they should be able to say it. So even if it's 10 out of 10 clear and concise and great, do your advocates know the message? Are they able to repeat that to others? And then lastly, make sure you're investing in a relationship with those people, that someone on your team, someone on your board is investing in those relationships so you can get to know them and answer questions they have and really grow that relationship. And by the way, your board members are advocates, right? They should be your biggest advocates. And if your board isn't actively engaged in the fundraising process, they're not sharing about your organization, then you've got some work to do there, because board members should be your best advocates. Okay, and then allies. I want to hit on this real quick. So allies are partner organizations or influencers. We work a lot with social media influencers, online creators who have similar audience or values as the nonprofits we work with. And they can share about your cause to tens of thousands of people in just a moment. And that can allow you to get new donors, new exposure to people, and eventually donors. So how do you do that? Well, just the short version is we have, we work with a lot of organizations on this, and it's a process, but the first steps are just to establish a win-win-win. What's the win for your organization, for the influencer or the partner, and for their audience? Because if their audience isn't getting a win, there's probably not going to be much response. Make it easy for them to partner with you so that they don't have to do a lot of work to make this partnership happen. And then once again, invest in a growing relationship. A personal relationship is going to go a long ways in these kind of partnerships. And again, they can lead eventually to a lot of new donors. Some of our clients have gotten thousands of new donors in one day because of an influencer partnership that they strategically built for months. But then all of a sudden it turned in, they promoted the nonprofit, they shared about it, they told stories, and then, thousands of donors, new donors came in 24 hours. We've seen that happen a few different times, actually. So it can really work. And then the third thing I wanted to mention is advertising. So this, again, to get new donors, sometimes you need to use a paid platform like Meta or Google to quickly reach your target audience. You can define your audience that you want to reach, and you can go target them with your messaging. You can also use advanced strategies like custom audiences or retargeting audiences, which are really valuable, especially if you have a small budget. And you don't have to have a big budget to start with these tools. And so I recommend just experimenting, trying it out. I also recommend getting an expert to help you, because you could waste a lot of money if you don't know what you're doing. So that's another reason to start small and get some help if you need it. And then if you don't already have a Google ad grant, that's a great thing to apply for so that you can get free advertising from Google to your website. All right, so the final lever, the final step here that I wanted to talk through, the final breakthrough opportunity is to establish accountable execution rhythm. So what in the world do I mean by that? Well, I'm gonna actually pose this as a question, really maybe a reality check for some of you. And it is, what will hold you back from implementing the first 4 strategies? I really am curious. There's a lot you've heard today. I shared a whole lot of information, but what's going to actually hold you back? Stop and think about it. Like, what's the most, you've got all these ideas, you've got some things you want to go do, but what is going to hold you back? I know for a lot of people, it's just, they don't have enough time. They just can't get it all done. And so I also want to encourage you, like, who's going to hold you accountable? Because if you don't have that accountability, if you don't have anybody in your sphere, anybody on your team that is going to hold you accountable, it's going to be hard for you to start breaking through these feelings and getting these things done, because they're not easy work. It takes a lot of intention and effort. So you need accountability, you need consistency, people around you helping you get there. You can't do it alone. And if you're just putting out fires all the time and you find yourself, like I did when I first started a nonprofit, just responding to the next urgent thing, then you're going to have a hard time working on the important things. You're going to have a hard time ever prioritizing the growth strategies I just talked about, and you'll stay stuck. You'll have a hard time breaking through those ceilings or getting past those hurdles that we mentioned, because you're just always responding to the next urgent thing. So I want to encourage you to find that time, find that accountability to focus on what's important, not just what's urgent. And if you're constantly just feeling overwhelmed, like I did as a nonprofit leader, and you're thinking, I just wear too many hats. I get it. I really do get it. And that all of these things are exactly why we created our Good Maker Growth Program. And I want to tell you about a story real quick of Jennifer. She was in our cohort one year, I think last year. And she, we'll just pretend that's Jennifer over there. And one day I was teaching this, I think it was on Zoom, and I look at her face, and this person, Jennifer, who's normally just a visionary, inspired, creative, energetic, she's hardworking, she's a good maker, right? She's out there doing great work. That day, I could tell she was feeling discouraged. She was uncertain. She was just feeling overwhelmed, like a lot of us do sometimes. So I went and talked to her after class, and we were talking through this, and I realized that, she just had so much on her plate, she wasn't sure what to do. But thankfully, in the cohort, we weren't alone. We had each other. So everybody kind of rallied around her over the next few weeks. I coached her. I gave her some ideas, helped her get unstuck. And, she came into that cohort with a campaign where the year before she had raised $5,000 for that campaign. And it was okay, it was decent results, but she thought she could do better. But through the cohort, we all rallied together. We helped her execute the plan that we have in our framework, the step-by-step plan. And she actually raised $60,000 in that same campaign. So that's not doubling or tripling, that's over 10xing. That's way more than she ever expected to grow. And so that was super encouraging for me. But that's the kind of results that can happen if you're using, the best practices that we teach, and you have the accountability of the cohort. So I want to encourage you, if you want to find that kind of clarity and confidence in fundraising and in marketing for your nonprofit, to join our next cohort. We have another one coming up really soon, and we call this the Good Maker Growth Program. And in the program, you get to raise more awareness and raise more funds. We teach you how to do that, and we do that with you, ultimately finding those breakthroughs that we're all looking for. It's a 60-day program. It's a small group. Less than 10 people. Sometimes it's, 6 people. You're just working together. There's going to be bi-weekly Zoom calls, and then coaching and assignments where you get all the exercises that I showed you today, plus a lot more, and we're walking you through that. If you're interested in that, Michael will put a link in the chat, so you can just click on that, or you can scan the QR code. But you can go apply for the cohort, learn a little bit more about it, apply, and then we'll follow up and let you know if you're a good fit, or if we want to ask any more questions. We would love to have you in the program. Just imagine yourself a few months from now after the program. You're so proud, you're hanging out on a Zoom call, just with your comfy clothes, coffee or your tea, if you're a tea drinker, in hand, and you're Zooming and you're celebrating because you're finishing the cohort. You've got a certificate. We give you a certificate, for the program. We will give you a shirt, so you got your Good Maker shirt on, and you're Zooming in. And more importantly, you're excited about fundraising. You're not dreading it anymore. You're crushing your goals. You're actually hitting and crushing those fundraising goals. Your board members are so excited because you're doing so well, and you're high-fiving them. You're hiring more people so that you don't have to wear all the hats. And you're working on the most important work, not just the urgent work, and hopefully paying yourself what you and your team deserve, because often nonprofits don't get the compensation that they deserve. And so as you start to fundraise, a lot of these things can happen. As you start to grow and reach new audiences, some of these things will flow from it. And we would just love to be a part of that journey for you. So go apply for the cohort. The link's in the chat. And I would love to just save the last 10 minutes of our time for Q&A, and any questions that you have for me that don't get answered, feel free to email this email address, because we'd love to answer all your questions.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. And we do have a bunch of questions that came in, but please,
Awesome.
we will get to as many as we can. If we don't
Sure.
get to any, please feel free to reach out to Jesse. He's super helpful. I'll jump right into it. We have a pre-submitted question from Adrian. She was wondering, how do we inspire our executive director to make decisions and take action instead of staying in the decision or discussion / planning stage?
That's great. Well, I think a couple things that I would say are it might just be helpful for him or her to realize that that's what's happening. And so if you have the type of relationship with them that you can actually just communicate that, hey, this is, we need to make a decision, we need to take action. Another tool that could be used is there's some good personality tests out there, some strengths and things. There's one called the Berkman. It helped me realize that I was the kind of person that tended to overthink decisions too, just like this person. And so once I realized that my team needed me to take action and be action oriented. So I think a few things that always help is just, frank conversations, having deadlines, and making the decision really clear that it's, so that it's not vague. We're deciding between 10,000 things. It's no, is it this or is it this? And we need a decision. So giving a little bit of urgency to that, helping them realize that the team is waiting and need the answers. I think that'll all help. I can speak from someone who has that same challenge and say that all of those things help me get focused and make a decision before a deadline or an urgent issue comes up. So I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. Structured communication is very, very helpful for
Yeah.
everyone. Pre-submitted question from Lily. She's wondering, how does a new nonprofit best create awareness and obtain seed or startup funding to get off the ground? I know you mentioned a few different options. Do you have a favorite or one that you would suggest for a newer nonprofit?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways, but my go-to is going to be your board. Hopefully your board is not just, three friends that, you roped in to be on your board. Like if that's the case, expand your board, make every board member intentional. Some of them should have the capacity to give a lot, but all of them should be giving at least some. I think it should be mandatory for every board member to give, even if that's a $5 gift. Like it shows that they are invested and they care. Even if they can't give to get you the big funds that you need to get started, maybe they know people and they can network with you. They can introduce you to their neighbors, their coworkers, and their family members, and help you get in front of the right people to invite people to give. So the fastest way to get off the ground is those major gifts, and getting just a few big gifts will give you the capital, the funds you need to go and do all of these other things that you need to do. So to get those major gifts, I would start with your network, your personal relationships, your board, and their network and personal relationships.
And I guess branching off that, we had another question about focusing on those major gifts. What are the best ways to turn some of those customers into a committed donor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to get someone committed, I would just say that a relationship's going to go a long ways. And I would also say just communicating your impact stories. I keep highlighting storytelling, but are they realizing and seeing the impact of their giving? And so that will make someone who's never given want to give. It'll make someone who has given so grateful they did. I also would highlight when someone gives their very first time, even if it's a small gift, you should have radical gratitude toward them. You should give them what we say is like 3 to 4 touch points in the first 60 days. Or the first 90 days. So they should get not just that handwritten thank you note or the automated receipt email. They should get more than that. They should get a phone call from a board member, or a video thank you from the executive director, or a personal email from someone on the team, or even better, somebody that was impacted by their gift or by your organization could write them a thank you note or record a video. Those type of touch points make someone so grateful they gave because they see the impact, their gift mattered, and they want to give again.
Love that. Very well said. We had a question come in from Simon. After you've turned those customers into committed donors and you've grown a little bit, what are some more possible ways for me to grow my organization's believers and major donors?
What was that last few words? So what?
Possible ways to grow my organization's believers and major donors.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, a lot of what we shared today is going to be the answer, but I would say, just continuing to, for one, have the vision that givers, a lot of people on your donor list can probably give more than you ever expected. So you need to cast a vision for that for them. They're not going to give a big gift if you don't have a big vision. And so cast a big vision. What are you going to use those funds for? That's going to be attractive to major donors. Major vision attracts major donors and major gifts. And so have that, and don't be afraid to be innovative, and have those relationships with them so that you can communicate that vision and that innovation. And so, yeah, I would just say a lot of what I talked about is going to be the answer. But as far as the major donors go, I would just say, that relationship, that big vision, and be open to just making the ask. A lot of nonprofits don't get big gifts because they don't ask for big gifts. So if that's you, just don't be afraid to make that invitation, and get to know people. Sit down across from them, ask them questions, listen well, and just have a short, subtle invitation to give at the end, and then bite your tongue and let them respond. And you'll be surprised at how many new major givers that will come in through that process.
Great answer. Lots of actionable insights that you're providing there. Switching gears a bit, we had a question that came from Seth. As a leader, how do you stay organized across all of your channels?
Yeah, it's good. I think that's every individual needs to have a system to stay organized. And a lot of times we get into too many systems, or we try too many things, with technology today or what it is. For me personally, I'm not sure if you're talking about time management or task management, but for me, I've tried, we have a project management tool that we use that has literally everything in there, all my to-dos, all the projects I'm working on, and they all have deadlines and a time estimate of how long it'll take me. But then the end of the day, sometimes that can be overwhelming. It's very helpful. It's essential. So I always also have a list on a post-it note of the 3 things that are the top priority for the day. And so that gives me the focus I need. And, really it's hard sometimes to do more than 3 really important things in a day. So with emails and meetings and everything else. So I would say have all your things in one clear system that works for you, and then prioritize that down to 1, 2, or 3 things for each day, and stay focused on those. I like to actually identify what those 3 things are the day before. So I'll walk in the next day to the office and I have focus. I know exactly what I need to work on, and I don't get distracted by my inbox. I also turn off a lot of my notifications, try to check my email only a couple times a day, and just try to stay focused on the important work and not just the urgent work.
I love that. I've heard that from a lot of people as well. Prioritizing, setting yourself up for the next day, and having
Yeah.
everything planned out is just a really good way to stay organized and stay on top of all of your many, many tasks.
Yeah.
Pre-exclude a question from Veronica. Do you have any tips on leadership or what you should focus on when you have very limited funds?
Mm. Yeah. Well, I would say, again, the board should be helping you break out of that by giving funds. So if your board isn't engaged, then focus on that, getting your board engaged, or getting a new set of board members, which I know can take time. And then as a part of that process, I would encourage you to be recruiting your board intentionally. Don't just beg anybody to be on your board, but go invite people that can bring real strategic value, maybe gifts, maybe connections in to your board. And then train them and set the expectation up front that it's required that they give. They're expected to participate in networking and fundraising on behalf of the organization, sharing stories, and train them on how to do that. Help them to know your core message and the stories that they can share, and know how to participate in those ways. Because your board, at a very small organization without a lot of funds, your board can provide that first few big gifts, the first few connections to help you get out of that space, and then you can invest in other ways and growing the other ways. So like we talked about today with your website or your advertising or online presence, all of those things, once you have a little bit of funds and your board's engaged, hopefully you can branch out and start doing some of those other strategies too.
Love that. I think that was a great way for us to end our session today with a great
Okay.
answer like that. Thank you, Jesse. And thank you everyone for joining us today. That concludes our session for today. We want to thank Jesse and everyone at Branches Missions Lab for your fantastic leadership hacks and some really great actionable practices that I think we can all take home. We will be sending everyone the slide deck and the recording at the end. So I know there's a lot of QR codes and a lot of links. So don't worry, you will get access to all of those before the end of the week. Before we go, I just want to let everyone know that there will be a short survey that will pop up right after this session. It's only going to take you about 20 seconds. We would greatly appreciate hearing your feedback on the session. So I hope you will all fill that out. We also have our next webinar coming out on Tuesday, April 4th with Beth Brodrowski from Iris Creative Group. She'll be walking us through the power of a toolkit. So she'll set you up with the right tools that you need to expand your marketing reach and identify the right candidates for new ambassadors. Meredith is going to leave a link for that in the chat below. So thank you again, everyone. I hope to see you all at the next webinar. I'm going to pass it off to Jesse for a final goodbye.
Yeah, thank you all for making good out there. Keep going. Really grateful for it. Have an awesome day. Bye.
Amazing. Thank you, Jesse. Thanks, everyone.